Hello everyone and welcome! I hope you all have been having a great week, as it has certainly been a good one here for me in the shop. Of course, I want to give a huge thanks to everyone who checked out last week's video introducing the Lamborghini Countach project. I've been really excited to share that project with all of you, and it's been great to see some hype from you in the audience as well. Definitely something a little different from my previous builds, but I've been chipping away at it and making some good progress. So far so good, definitely stay tuned for more on that in an upcoming video, but one of my main focuses this week has been getting the tutorial video for the 1/24 scale 4x4 chassis finished up. That video should be going up on the channel next week along with the STL files for 3D printing. Those tutorial videos tend to take a while to complete, not just because there's a lot of footage to go through, but also I really want to try and make things as clear and informational as possible for anyone interested in building one of these chassis along with me. I've gotten a lot of great feedback over the years on many of the previous tutorial videos I've put together for our other RC chassis designs, so I'm hoping this next one will be no exception. Of course, as always though, if you have any questions, please feel free to send a message. But it's one of those situations where I've got tons and tons of stuff going on, both over at the workbench and here at the computer, but nothing quite ready to go up on the channel just yet. So in an attempt to get at least something out there this week for all of you to watch, and hopefully somewhat stay in the YouTube algorithm, I thought I would pick out a topic for today's video that's a very frequently asked question, and that's in regards to adding driver figures to these RC models. Now I've added some figures to a few of these models that I've built, well really more of a head bust than a full figure. 3D modeling a human character is a very different process from designing functional drivetrains and suspensions. That's not at all my forte, so all I did was create a racing helmet and some shoulders that, although not super detailed, does look pretty nice on the finished model, and helps to make the car look like it's being driven by a person rather than a ghost. Now really, a big reason for the lack of driver figures in the majority of vehicles that I own, whether they were custom built or ready to run, is mostly just due to a lack of interest. I'm just a lot more interested in the vehicles and engineering itself rather than the figures. So naturally, I tend to not include drivers in a lot of the vehicles that I build or people in these dioramas. Also, I feel like unless you're very skilled at detailing and painting these miniatures, or making a race driver with a helmet, it's very hard to make a human that could almost be mistaken for a real person in a photograph or video, compared to obtaining that same level of lifelike realism with just a vehicle or building. For example, I'm really happy with the appearance of this Chevelle, and captured at the right angle, it really does look a lot like the real thing, but I feel like by adding a figure, especially with my lack of skill, it would detract rather than add to the lifelike appearance, breaking the illusion, not adding to it. Now of course, this is more the case while the car is stationary. When it's driving around, it does look a bit strange not having a driver figure, so I can definitely see both sides of the coin. It's sort of like I've talked about before with adding LEDs. As demonstrated, it can be a cool detail that when done correctly can definitely enhance the lifelike appearance and allow for some nice shots such as these. But when done incorrectly, such as using LEDs that are so bright it's shining through the plastic or into the wheel wells or other areas that it's not supposed to, at that point I think it starts to detract more than add to the lifelike appearance and kind of breaks the illusion of realism. Of course, that's just my opinion and reasoning why I tend to not add drivers to a lot of these vehicles. I totally understand for some hobbyists, creating these figures is a huge part of the appeal, but that's just really not the case for me. That said though, I would certainly like to experiment more with adding drivers to some of these vehicles I currently have or plan to build in the future. For some projects, such as the RC car chases that we put together, that is an example of where I think not having driver figures does actually detract from the lifelike look of the finished chase. It looks a bit odd having cars driving around without drivers in this particular context, and it's not like you're ever going to be seeing the cars close enough to where a smaller amount of detail present on those figures is really going to detract it all from the realism. Now with larger scale RC vehicles, especially around 1/10 scale, it's pretty easy to find figures, as there are tons of options around maybe like 5 to 8 inches in height, which will pair nicely with a lot of 1/10 scale RC vehicles. Now something that I've discussed on this channel before is to be aware that the scale of a lot of these RC models that may be listed on the box isn't always the true mathematical scale of the vehicle. This is something you're going to need to keep in mind when selecting a figure to fit inside. For example, while a 6-inch figure may look great for some RC vehicles advertised as being 1/10 scale, they may look way too small or large for others. Unfortunately, that's just the subjective world of scaling in the RC hobby. I'm sure many of you out there who like to add figures to your vehicles are already well aware of this. Although unlike with some things, at least with humans, there's a lot of size variations, so it's not like it's super critical to have the figure be an exact height as you could just pass it off as being a little shorter or taller than average. But at a certain point, it could start to look a little bit out of scale, but at the end of the day, it's all just for fun, so no point in sweating it too much. Now when we're going down in size to something more like these 1/24 scale models, you don't seem to have a huge selection of posable action figures like you have available in larger sizes, so things can be a little bit more difficult here. I've seen some driver figures available for sale, but it sure would be nice to have a good 3D printable solution. There's some software that I've been messing around with called MakeHuman. It's a free open source software option that I think is available as both a standalone program, but it can also be downloaded as an add-on for Blender. As the name implies, you can simply adjust a few parameters and within seconds generate a figure which you can easily customize and pose. Whether you want a person who's standing up in a suit or sitting down with a t-shirt or whatever else, you have the ability to generate these models and customize them extremely quickly and easily. Of course, you can make further modifications and scale them to be whatever size that you need right there in Blender. I see this as having huge potential for some of these 1/24th and 1/25th scale projects, as like I said, my skills when it comes to modeling humans is basically non-existent, so having the ability to generate these models within seconds using this free plugin is extremely useful. If you have access to a 3D scanner, all you have to do is scan either the seat or the entire interior that you'd like the figure to fit into, and then utilize that scanned data to position the figure exactly where it needs to be and scale it to the correct size. From there, you can get the figure 3D printed and painted. Although one of the issues that I've been running into is that the models that MakeHuman generates are not watertight meshes ready for 3D printing. For example, see how the clothes here have no thickness? That's obviously not suitable for 3D printing. If you're using these characters for animation or putting into a video game, that's not a problem, but if you actually want to get them 3D printed, it's going to require some additional work to modify the design yourself to make everything watertight and able to be 3D printed. Now this is still a huge head start compared to doing this all from scratch, but I've only been playing around with this for a little while, and I haven't really figured out a great workflow yet for easily getting these models ready for 3D printing. You kind of just have to manually go through and modify the meshes and combine everything together. If you know of an easy way to convert these models generated by MakeHuman into watertight meshes ready for 3D printing, certainly let me know, but otherwise just expect some work to be required to get these models ready to be 3D printed. Again though, I am really impressed by MakeHuman. The ability to instantly generate these models with a ton of customization is really a fantastic thing these developers have put together. What would really put the icing on the cake for these types of projects would be having these humans be watertight and ready for 3D printing without having to go in there and make the design alterations yourself. But that's just something I've been playing around with a bit, and it's something you might see me use for some future projects. I'll leave a link to their website below in the description if you'd like to check it out. There's a ton of great information and video tutorials available, which makes it very easy to learn how to use. But that's going to be all for today's video. For those of you more experienced with adding figures to either the smaller scale RC or static models, or the more conventional 10 scale stuff, definitely feel free to share any tips or recommendations below in the comments. As always, a huge thanks to all of our channel members and Patreon supporters who help to make these videos possible, and a huge thanks to all of you for watching. There's lots of cool stuff in the works, so be sure to stay tuned for more on that, but I'll see you all next time.